Harvey Weinstein is in prison now, a disgraced monster that Hollywood pretends it never loved. Award shows make speeches about believing women. Studios cut ties. Actors who once thanked him in their Oscars speeches scrub his name from their stories. It's easy to look back and say, of course he was a villain, but there was a time when calling him a predator could end your career overnight. And that's exactly what happened to one actress. Before the headlines, before #MeToo trended, before it was safe to hate Harvey Weinstein, she tried to warn everyone. She spoke up when the industry was still clapping for him. And for that, she lost almost everything she'd spent her whole life building. You probably know her face. You might even know her name. But you almost never hear about what Hollywood did to Rose McGowan after she exposed Harvey Weinstein. Before she became the woman shouting about predators on red carpets, Rose was supposed to be the next big thing. In the late 90s and early 2000s, she had everything the industry said it wanted: striking looks, indie credibility, and just enough edge to feel dangerous without scaring studio executives. She stole scenes in The Doom Generation, became a horror icon in Scream, and turned into a global TV star on Charmed. Magazines put her on their covers. Directors called her the future. This is the version of Hollywood you're meant to remember, the glamorous, chaotic girl who just happened to orbit the powerful producer everyone claimed was a genius. What you're not supposed to see is what was happening off camera, how that same producer, Harvey Weinstein, allegedly turned a 23-year-old actress's life into a private nightmare. Then used the full weight of his power to make sure the world never believed her. According to Rose, it happened at the Sundance Film Festival in 1997. She was young, excited, and still naive enough to believe that a meeting with a famous producer in his hotel suite was exactly what everyone said it was: a chance to talk about her career. Instead, she says, Weinstein led her into a room, closed the door, and raped her. She has repeated this account for years now, under her own name, fully aware that every time she tells it, powerful people roll their eyes and call her crazy. In the moment, though, she didn't have language like rape culture or hashtags or a movement behind her. She had a man everyone described as untouchable, and a team of lawyers telling her that if she didn't sign a settlement and disappear, he would bury her. $100,000 to buy her silence. Pocket change to him. The rest of her life to her. Rose took the deal. She has never hidden that. She signed the papers, accepted the money, and tried to convince herself that maybe she could still have a future in the business if she played by the rules. Think about the position she was in. This wasn't just any job. Acting was something she'd been chasing since she was a teenager, the thing that got her out of a chaotic childhood and gave her a sense of identity. You're 23, surrounded by agents, managers, lawyers, all insisting this is how it's done. They tell you that if you make noise, you'll never work again. That Harvey can pull every offer, every audition, every relationship that matters. So you do what almost anyone would do when they're isolated, terrified, and outgunned: you try to survive. The problem is, surviving in a system like that means learning to live inside a lie. From the outside, it didn't look like a woman whose career had just been shattered. Rose was still booking work. Jawbreaker, Charmed, red carpets, magazine shoots, late-night interviews where she laughed on cue and did what every actress is trained to do: sell the project, smile for the cameras. Never bring up the men who control everything. To fans, it looked like she was winning. But behind the scenes, something darker was happening. She says that after Sundance, doors started to close in ways that didn't make sense. Auditions that seemed promising suddenly evaporated. Directors who loved her work would go silent. People who had called her the future stopped returning calls. Years later, multiple filmmakers would say they were warned off certain actresses by Weinstein's company, branded as difficult or crazy or a nightmare to work with. When a man like that decides you're a problem, he doesn't have to fire you. He just has to make sure nobody else will hire you. Imagine trying to process that. On paper, your career looks okay. You're on a hit TV show, you're recognizable, you're doing the thing millions of people dream about. But you know that the ceiling above you isn't glass, it's concrete, and it has Harvey Weinstein's fingerprints all over it. You can feel the difference between being nurtured by a system and merely tolerated by it. You also know that if you say his name out loud, the same people quietly avoiding you now will turn into open enemies. For years, Rose tried to navigate that contradiction. In interviews, she would drop hints about a studio head or a powerful man who had assaulted her. She would talk in code about Hollywood being run by monsters. But coded language doesn't trend. Vague warnings don't cut through an industry that's built on rumor and spin. You can't expose a king with blind items and half-stories. And every time she pulled back the curtain, just a little, she could feel the machine push back. By the mid-2010s, Rose seemed less like a working actress and more like a woman shouting into a void. Hollywood had quietly moved on without her. But outside the studio gates, something was starting to shift. A few reporters were finally willing to ask dangerous questions about Harvey Weinstein. Rose decided to answer them in full detail. She went on the record with journalist Ronan Farrow, gave dates, locations, names of lawyers, even showed the paperwork from that six-figure settlement. She tweeted directly at Amazon's Jeff Bezos, warning him that his studio was funding rapists after a Weinstein-backed series she was attached to was mysteriously killed. She named Harvey publicly, not with blind items, not with coy hints, but in plain English. And just like back in 1997, the system's first response wasn't to listen. It was to shut her up. Within days of some of her most aggressive tweets, Rose's Twitter account was suspended for violating terms of service. At the exact moment she was trying to rally other women to come forward, one of the only platforms she controlled was yanked away. Meanwhile, the New York Times and the New Yorker finally dropped their bombshell investigations. Suddenly, dozens of women were naming Harvey. Actresses, assistants, models, people who had spent years in silence were now being praised for their bravery. #Neto exploded. Careers were destroyed. Harvey was finished. And yet the woman who had been screaming the truth into a void for 2 decades was still treated like a problem. Here's the uncomfortable contrast Hollywood doesn't like to acknowledge. When it was finally safe to hate Harvey Weinstein, powerful people lined up to condemn him. Agents who had sent actresses to his hotel rooms gave solemn interviews. Actors who had joked about the casting couch for years suddenly discovered feminism. Awards shows turned into confessionals. But Rose McGowan had been calling them out by name, on camera, before it was fashionable. Instead of being embraced as a hero of the movement she helped spark, she was labeled unhinged, toxic, too angry. Jobs didn't come back. Studio offers didn't appear. What she got instead were lawsuits, smear campaigns, and a drug charge that she still insists was the result of someone planting cocaine on her coat. This is where the story stops being a clean narrative about speaking truth to power and turns into something messier. Rose is not a perfect victim. She's loud. She burns bridges. She called out actresses she felt were profiting off a movement she started. She trashed Democrats and Republicans. She said #MeToo had been hijacked by the same system that protected predators for decades. In an industry that loves redemption arcs as long as you play your role, she refused to stick to the script. And Hollywood punished her for that just as much as it ever punished her for accusing Harvey. Today, Rose lives outside the Hollywood system she once tried to conquer. The offers dried up long ago. The phone doesn't ring with studio deals or franchise reboots. Instead, she writes, speaks, and occasionally appears at events as a kind of exile from the industry she helped expose. You can argue about her tactics or her politics. But if you praise #MeToo and Harvey's downfall, you have to remember who paid the highest price for lighting the fuse.